What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Young Guns podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about a player who's really making a name for himself, a player who's defying the odds, a player who could potentially be better than a former teammate because there's a whole debate concerning that, and that is Tage Thompson. Tage Thompson is currently worthy of his contract extension at the moment. A guy that was part of the Ryan O'Reilly trade a couple years ago. There wasn't a lot of expectations concerning him. He was kind of considered a guy that was not properly being developed in his time in St. Louis. And now look at him go. He currently is top five in goals scored in the NHL with 15, and obviously he will continue to score at a high pace. He's currently top 10 in terms of points in the NHL. If I'm not mistaken, he is currently tied at sixth for points. And I do believe that Tage Thompson is the Buffalo Sabres' best forward at the moment and for years to come. And Luca, we'll love to hear your thoughts on Tage Thompson.
Yeah, well, it's actually kind of funny because when he signed that contract last year after his breakout season of 68 points in 78 games, I criticized it. And I said that, to me, to be honest, personally, he's not a $7.1 million player. And I don't know, I think people looked at me and said, don't sleep on Tage Thompson. He's that good. And I just said, listen, you know, I looked at his career and I'm like, you know what? This guy hasn't really done anything up to date. It was just more so like last year he kind of broke out, had a really good year, and I think he got paid for it. And I was like, okay, like look, this kid's good. This guy's good, but he's nothing more than that. I don't think he's worth $7 million. And then, well, this year so far, he's making me eat my words a little bit. 15 goals, 17 assists. He's got 32 points in 24 games, and it's not just the points that I think people are talking about. I think it's how he's scoring his points. And I don't know if you guys see, but pretty much every single game the Buffalo plays, Tage Thompson has a highlight reel, whether it's a deke, a move, a
That's
goal,
true.
an assist. So Tage Thompson is doing it in really good fashion. And I think what's interesting about Tage Thompson is that, he's another player kind of like what Robertson was in the previous video that we talked about, where basically, he kind of just fell under the radar. Nobody really knew who he was. He was thrown into that trade for Ryan O'Reilly in 2018 with Berglund and Sabotka, along with a first and a second. But there was no real expectation. He was drafted 26th overall by the Blues, but he hadn't really lived up to that expectation. So he goes to Buffalo, and he struggles in this first year. 18-19 has 12 points in 65 games, and there's a lot of talk about, okay, is he going to make it? Is this really what he's going to do? And then in 2020, 2021, he plays 38 games and gets 14 points. And you start to see a little bit more of, okay, 14 points, 38 games, that's about a 38, 40-point pace. That's a good for third line in the NHL. And you know what? At 26th overall, to have a third liner in the NHL, Tage Thompson with a 6'6", that makes a lot of sense and I think could work. And then last year, he just kind of took the league by storm. 68 points, 38 goals, 30 assists in 78 games. And, I was like, okay, really good career year for him. But is this guy the real deal? And then, guys, I think I can confirm to you right now, this guy is the real deal. And I'm eating my words. And you know what? I was wrong. I think that, he is worth $7.1 million. I think he's playing like a $7.1 million player. And I think he's going to be the future in Buffalo, and Buffalo's future looks bright. They've got a lot of really good pieces over there, and adding a guy like Tage Thompson, who's been able to really play at the level that he's been able to play at, I think is good, and I think he's made everyone around them better as well.
Well,
So
this is a crazy, fact. Okay, when he had his career year last season, he was only getting paid $1.4 million. He
still is.
currently is in the final year of his 3-year contract, where he's still getting paid $1.4 million. It's only next season in the 2023-2024 season where he's getting paid around $7.1 million up until 2029, 2030. So that is fantastic in terms of worth on that deal. And we do know that the Buffalo Sabres do have a lot of cap space, but with guys producing at this pace, it was a steal of a signature to get him signed for less than $10 million if he's going to continue at this pace. And I applied, Kevin Adams for what he did. I think he currently is, you know, I mean, it's not really hard, but he's one of the most underrated general managers in the league because of the team that he built. But he also is the best general manager that Buffalo's had in years. You know, they
Yeah,
went through a really rough time. And, looking at, Tage Thompson right now, killing it in 24 games, 32 points, 15 goals, 17 assists. You have Rasmus Dahlin as well, who's finally becoming that bona fide uh, first line defenseman. 19 points in 23 games. Jeff Skinner's, continuing to live up to his contract
and I
after, saving his ass last season. He has 25 points, 24 games. Alex Tuck, who was part of the Jack Eichel trade, 23 points in 24 games. Another key piece, Dylan Cousins, 21 points in 24 games. Paprika, 13 points
paprika,
in 24 games.
paprika, you mean not paprika?
Paterka, yeah, my God, Jesus. I've never been the best
What?
with names, guys,
What?
but like,
You're hungry, Chris, bro? You want some?
yeah. But like you look at, Owen Power, 10 points, Jack Quinn, 12 points, Middlestat finally, picking up his game, 13 points. Olofsson, who was a part of trade rumors for the last 2 years, 13 points as well. Everyone's performing. Like all the young studs are
Yeah,
performing. Guys that
Buffalo's
are
not.
gonna be with the team long term. Um and
Buffalo's really not far off, though. That's the thing that I think people need to understand is like, we look at Buffalo where they are in the standings. They're really not that far off. Jeff
they had a
Skinner's
really good
been,
start to the season. I literally had them as a wild card team to make the
yeah,
playoffs, but it's been shaky these last couple of weeks for the Buffalo
yeah,
Sabres.
they
But Tage
struggled. They
Thompson
struggled.
has been, flourishing under the circumstances.
That's true. But I think, look, like I said before, I think Tage Thompson makes everyone around him better. I think he's made Jeff Skinner better. I think Jeff Skinner's turned his career around a little bit too, which is good because it makes that contract worth it. Um, in that sense as well. But I think Buffalo going forward and just kind of where the team is at and where Tage Thompson fits in, this is a guy that they're going to rely upon. But what's interesting with Buffalo is they've got so many good young pieces coming up. And you mentioned Paterka, you mentioned Cousins as well, Darlene and Owen Power. Buffalo's really not far off from being a team that's going to, I think, make the playoffs and be a staple in the NHL for years to come. And I think that Tage Thompson's going to be the guy that's going to ride that horse with them.
He
He's
like
he's the best. He's the best
he
player.
won't win any individual awards this
No,
season.
I don't think so.
But, don't be surprised if he does within his career. As of right now, even though he's on pace for 51 goals, we'll see if that happens. That would be the most goals he ever scored in his career. But um, I do believe that Tage Thompson could potentially hit the Sabres 100 point class and, also potentially score 50 goals. Whether that happens or not, we'll see what happens. But
I
we could, yeah, sorry.
I just want to say one last thing, kind of, but like basically, Robertson and Tage Thompson. I know we did the Robertson video before. Um, Basically, these two guys, what I really like about their stories is that they've kind of just taken the NHL by storm. And they're guys that when you talk about some of the best players in the league, you don't put these guys in those categories. But I think more Tage Thompson makes everybody kind of like surprised. And like I think he proves every single day that he's one of the most underrated players in the NHL. And I think he's showing that. And whether or not he can continue it, we'll see. But I think Buffalo's got themselves a really good player here, and if he can play up to that contract of 7.1 million moving forward, and continue these point totals, then so be it. He's still 25. He's still got room to grow and become even better than he already is. So,
Yeah.
um,
I
excited to
don't.
see what the future lies in Buffalo.
I don't think he gets 100 points. I think he gets 70 to 80 points this season. I'm a strong believer in that, but I just want to give credit to a guy that deserves a lot of credit, but not a lot of people talk about him. Maybe the Buffalo Sabre fan base does, but I mean outside the league, a very underrated coach that's really helping the Buffalo Sabres is Don Granado. You look at Tage Thompson, you look at how Skinner, is back in form, Darlene, Cousins, the list goes on. He's the perfect coach to have developing these young players. And, we always talk about Martin St. Louis being, that guy that is a coach's dream, essentially, right? A guy who's
Yeah,
friends with the players, but also knows what it takes to be successful in the NHL and to get them to that level, to help them develop. But Don Granado is another example of that. And I do believe that, he deserves a lot more recognition. And, before he came in, Tage Thompson was like, oh my God, like this guy's just a throw in piece, 14 points in 21. Uh, didn't play 2019, 2020. Only played one game for Buffalo, 0 points. 65 games in 2018, 2019, 12 points. And then before that, he played with St. Louis in 2017, 2018, 41 games, 9 points. But like
Yeah,
ever since last season, Don, Granado was probably a huge, huge contributor in getting Tage Thompson to where he's at right now. And it all comes down to development, having a good organization that knows how they treat their young stars or young players and how to develop them into what they're expected to turn into, but also sometimes in this case, Tage Thompson exceeding expectations and becoming a lot better than people thought. Everyone
yeah,
forgets that he was drafted in the first round in 2016 by St. Louis. Even though it was 26th overall, he's still a former first round pick, right? So the
yeah,
potential is always there. When you're drafted in the first round, you always have you're always looked at as a guy that's gonna make the NHL. But like we spoke about Robertson, he was a second rounder. There's a lot of players that are doing well right now that you know weren't necessarily drafted in the first round, second round, third round, fourth round, and then you have like classic cases like Datsuk, uh, that were drafted in the seventh round, for example. So I mean, you never know in the NHL, but it all comes down to a good coach, a good organization, and a good development system. And
yeah.
that's the final thing I would like to say about Tage Thompson, the Buffalo Sabres. But guys, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the Buffalo Sabres and specifically Tage Thompson. How many points does he get this year? Where do you see him in terms of his career, in terms of what he could accomplish, in terms of individual awards, maybe a Stanley Cup? We'd like to hear what the Buffalo Sabres fan base has to say concerning Tage Thompson, but anyone who loves Tage Thompson as a player, would like to hear your thoughts. And guys, if you haven't liked this video already, make sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Young Guns Podcast.